limited on where we can go and what we can do with gyms being closed. And I'm hearing things where they're letting 10 people into gyms and it just keeps changing. So you never know day to day, do we? So what the goal is today is to give you some ideas on what you can do, what strengthening is. And I realize in the audience, we've got some people that are high level exercisers. We're going to have some people that are wondering what strengthening is, what they can do. Maybe they're starting to feel weak and deconditioned at home. So I want to try to hit everybody. So when we do have the question areas, some of the stuff you may already know, but if there's something specific you want to ask, bring it up. And if we need to jump around a little bit, that's what this is for, is for you to learn and have access to some information. For me as a physical therapist, remember, most of the patients that I see, something's happened to them. So they've had a lifting injury, they've had a sport injury, something's damaged, they've had a surgery, maybe they've had a major trauma, car accident. How do you get back? How do you get strength back? What is strength? What do we need it for? Go ahead and go to the next slide, Guillermo. So the objectives today, we're going to explain the benefits of strengthening of skeletal muscle. So there's cardiac muscle. We're not going to talk about that, just the skeletal muscle today. Explain the anatomy of the muscle, tendon, and bone. Present a variety of strengthening systems. So there's different ways to strengthen that some people aren't aware of, and demonstrate what proper form is for some exercises in an hour. We can't cover everything, obviously, but just kind of give you a taste of what you need to know to protect yourself, not hurt yourself. The next slide. So benefits of strengthening, like, why do we need to do it? This is really a short list, but it covers so many things, from decreasing injury, decreasing pain if you have chronic pain or acute pain, improving your posture and your balance. Some of us in the desert, we've had some falls, and maybe we've started using a walking aid like a cane or a walker. We want to get that physical performance improved for some of the things we like to do. Some of us are hikers, some of us work out in the gym, some of us are looking to do heavier things, like maybe we want to do an Everest climb, or there's some adventurers out there that have higher aspirations, and they're going to need strength for that. And then we all need to do is better control the body weight, right? Here we are in North America, some of the worst diets in the world, but it's so easy to eat those foods that taste so good. But the thing about muscle is muscle's metabolically active and fat's metabolically inactive. So the more muscle you have, you start burning your own calories just by having a better strength. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So decreasing injury, what does that mean? Where have you experienced your injuries? So some of them are definitely recreating and sports, and we also have the weekend warriors here where we haven't done anything in a while. Then all of a sudden, some friends call us up, let's go play some pickleball, let's do some golf, and all of a sudden we strain our back, strain a shoulder, strain a knee. Chores around the house, sometimes we're getting a little older, and hey, we've always done them. We vacuum, do the chores and everything else, but all of a sudden we're vacuuming that one day, we bend over a little bit to get under that end table or something, and then something goes and we can't straighten back up. Sometimes we're in the garage, we're lifting that 50-pound box that we put up when we were 30, and we've been living in the house for a while, and now we go to take it down when we're 50, and then something goes in the shoulder. Pushing, pulling, lifting, carrying, these are basically what human beings do with their bodies. So either at low speed or high speed, and that's another place where we can get things injured. And once they get injured, we stop moving it. So when we stop moving it, we're protecting it, it starts getting weaker, and that's what injury will do there. Then if you've injured your shoulder and you do a lot of traveling, putting that carry-on in the overhead bin. Of course, we're all hoping that day comes soon where we can start traveling again. But a lot of varieties of strength can help you decrease the injury and recover from it. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So decreasing pain. For some people, if you've noticed that you're doing something overhead, maybe even just changing a light bulb, maybe you've decided to paint a room and you notice that your back or your shoulders start aching when you're doing jobs requiring prolonged positioning or repetitive activity, maybe gardening or the housework again. Does your back ache with prolonged walking? Some people, they can walk 2 hours, they're out hiking and they're fine with a 30-pound pack on their back. Other people, they're walking 15 minutes and all of a sudden their back starts to ache. Some of these things are strength related with core muscles. Do your legs ache when you're trying to go hiking with friends? So you notice that some people can climb hills like a billy goat, and other people you get 5 steps in and then your legs start burning, wondering what that is. And then again, are you limiting your activity because you go to do something like play pickleball with a friend for the first time, the next day you can't get out of bed. You go hiking for the first time, you can't get out of bed the next day again. Getting that delayed onset muscle soreness just lets you know that you're in a weakened condition. So strengthening is what you're going to need to overcome that, so you get to do more things. That's the value of strength. The next slide. The other thing is with improving posture, when you look at the pictures here, we've all seen these people. And the one guy that says forward head, he's second from the right. With all the working on laptops and iPads and your phone, you're always tipping your head down looking at your phone. That helps to provoke that. So sometimes what's happening as we're aging and doing these habitual things is we lose that core strength and strength up in and around your neck and your shoulders. This is going to contribute to this poor posturing, and then you wonder why neck pain, headaches, tingling down the arm, pain in your back, you can't sit for very long, things like that. This is going to be the importance here. Going to the next slide. And then improving balance. So unfortunately, again, as we age, we start losing muscle. And when we lose the ones that control balance, then we start having falls. When we start having falls, here comes your hip fracture, your hip replacement, your hip pinning. Again, this is my world. This is the people that come to see us sometimes. And then when you talk with them, you think, wow, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, had you maybe started on an exercise regimen, build those balance muscles, you might have delayed that. The other thing is when the day arrives where you're already having trouble and you're already on the walker, like the lady on the left, sometimes what it's doing is you're trying to prevent a fall after that. So some people walking with walkers will still have falls, but lo and behold, you start strengthening those balance muscles. And even though they're still using a walker, they can decrease the risk for falls even with using a walking aid. And then, of course, if the balance is really good, looking at the yoga person on the right, when we can stand on one foot with our arms overhead, that's a pretty high level balance. Sometimes we're needing that balance for sport-related things. And so with any type of exercise, there's always a new level to achieve. Go to the next slide. And for physical performance, tying into all the things we have talked about already, the guy on the left hiking, not only is he hiking on flat ground, but you can see that there's a board that's there for some reason. So he's having to balance on that without falling off into the bush. So how much strength do you need to do to control that with the pack on your back, with the boots on, and so on? And then, of course, the pickleball players. If you look at the lady on the right, that position's called a lunge. And if you know what a lunge exercise is, and you've done lunges before, you know it makes your legs burn pretty good. So if you're playing pickleball for 2 hours or even 1 hour, off and on, of course, as games stop and start, you have the endurance and the strength to do that many hits to, of course, win. Next slide. And then improving your weight control. Like I said, if muscle is metabolically active, so you start burning calories, the more muscle you have, the more fat you have, it's metabolically inactive, so then it's easier to gain weight. And we're not talking about, 6-pack, 8-pack abs here. We're talking about you can be fit at different weights, being able to push, pull, lift, and carry, and even just keeping your weight managed, where sometimes we're not, the image you see in society sometimes is always the Marvel superhero body. And it's like, well, we don't all have the ability to get to that. So sometimes understanding with strength, you can be fit and a certain weight, but it's just controlling the weight. Going to the next slide. Any questions so far on any of those?
I think we're good, Ken.
Okay, let's go on to the next. So now we get into the anatomy of what are we really dealing with here. So again, from a physical therapy perspective, you got to look at what tissues are we using. And sometimes as a layperson, you walk into a gym, you see people that are very muscular, you see people that are really skinny, that are trying to get muscular, you see other people that are just trying to maintain a certain level of fitness. But what are you dealing with all the different types of tissues, and what does strengthening do for you? Well, bone, when you look at bone, and this can look a little complicated with a lot of words that don't make any sense, but The bone that is on the outside is the hard bone. That's what you think of when you fracture. That's what supports you. That's your frame. On the inside of the long bones, that's the bone marrow, and that's soft bone because that's where all your red blood cells are produced. So it's very well vascularized. As you can see, you got blood vessels going in and out of the bone, feeding it. So you don't think of bone as something that could bleed, but yes, it does have a circulatory system. And the thing is, as you get older, when your hormones start changing, and unfortunately the women have a tougher part with this, time with this than the men, is getting osteoporosis. And what'll happen is, bone is an interesting tissue. It's constantly building itself and destroying itself all day long. So what happens as you get older is the cells that start destroying the bone start winning over the ones that are building it. And then they do the blood test and you find out you got hypercalcemia, you got calcium in your blood. Where's that coming from? Well, it's coming from your bone. And then they do the x-ray, you find you have osteopenia, then you go get the DEXA scan, they find out that you got a fracture risk. And how do you manage that? Well, strengthening, when you overload your muscle, and even things like we talked about last time with walking, just pounding the ground, vibratory force to the bone actually stimulates it to mineralize itself. So when you're exercising, you're actually helping to stave off osteopenia, osteoporosis, but you got to do it early before the disease starts getting well established. Go to the next slide. So when you start looking at muscle, that's what we think of with strengthening, right? Is the actual tissue that moves you. When you look at muscle, muscle is in a lot of different shapes. I chose the bicep because everybody knows what it looks like. It's the easiest one to recognize. And you notice that muscle has a belly, and that muscle belly is made up of bundles of fibers called fascicles. And each of those fascicles holds a bundle of muscle fibers. And each of those muscle fibers holds a bundle of myofibrils. So now you're getting into all of these smaller and smaller cells that make up this entire muscle. So it's a really complicated tissue. Going into the next slide. In those myofibrils, you have actin and myosin filaments, and those are the ones on the right. So the tubular one that looks like it has the little bumps on it is the myosin, and the actin is the purpley stuff that's kind of in a twisted helix there. And you notice that when the muscles relax, there's a space there between the actin at the top and the myosin in the middle. And then when you contract it, when you squeeze the muscle together and you see it bulge and it starts to shorten, those actin and myosin filaments come in together like that. And then when you stretch the muscle, they pull apart. So muscle is an active tissue. It contracts and it relaxes. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So when you look at the anatomy of strengthening, what's happening is you look at the bones. Remember the bones, that hard tissue that's our frame? Well, that's your lever system. So your muscle is your active system that moves the levers and to lift weight. So as you see the person here, if you look to the right, the blue box is the load. If you look opposite of that along the forearm to the elbow, underneath it is the green triangles, the fulcrum, and then the active component is the biceps muscle itself. So this is actually a third-class lever. All of the things that we're doing with lifting is all physics. It's all lever systems and pulley systems inside the body. So you know yourself that if you take a pulley system with a rope and you're trying to lift a piano and through that pulley, and you don't have a strong enough rope, what's going to happen to the rope? Rope's going to tear, piano's going to drop. So when you're lifting and you're starting strengthening, what you have to think of is, how is my body going to react to what I've chosen to do when I'm lifting? And that's how I'm going to prevent injury. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is just talking about a Golgi tendon organ, but the point of this one is you see the picture of the muscle, and then you see that there's that whitish kind of tendon there that attaches to the cylindrical bone in this picture. So the tendon is a material that attaches that muscle belly to the bone to move it. And so all of this is explaining is that, you know, weightlifters always want to lift more weight, add on another plate. Well, this is just showing the absurdity. If you lifted 2,000 pounds, there's this tendon organ that's inside the tendon that won't allow your nervous system to pull hard enough to rip the tendon apart. That's when you try to lift the weight and your body just goes nope, and then you just lower it back down. Some guys that are really aggressive that want to lift the weight, the ones that start screaming in the middle of the gym, that's when they get the tendon ruptures because they're using their manual override, their brain to push it harder than it can handle. And then that's where you get the injuries. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So when you start ripping things, typically you're going to rip the anchoring system that anchors the muscle to the bone, and that's the tendon. So your muscle can keep getting bigger and bigger as you're lifting and as you develop it, but it's only as strong as the thing that it attaches itself to the bone, which is the tendon. So anybody in the audience that's had a rotator cuff tear, you're doing heavy shoulder exercise and you start tearing that tendon away from the bone, it doesn't matter how strong and how big you are. It's not the muscle that's going to fail. It's going to be the tendon. The other thing, when you hear of guys doing steroids and getting very massive, like huge amounts of muscle, the tendon doesn't grow. Only the muscle grows and gets affected by those anabolic steroids. So the muscle gets so big and so strong the tendon can't hold it, and these guys can end up rupturing tendons a lot easier because they have this abnormal size of the muscle. Now, of course, we're just talking about general fitness and working out, but just to illustrate how important it is to understand how the system works so that you know when you choose what you're going to use to strengthen, you're not going to injure yourself because it's not fun being on the injured roster. Go ahead and switch to the next slide. Any questions based on the anatomy of strengthening? Very good. Because you guys already know it. That's great. So some things to consider. If you've ever held a brand new baby in your arms, they're like a bowl of jelly. So babies are this cartilaginous being. All these tissues are underdeveloped. They're brand new. The bones aren't hard. They're all soft and gooey. That's why they can try to stand up and then they fall and then they're fine. Children, they're resilient and rubbery. They're jumping out of trees. They're going up to the playhouse and doing all that. They're running around, wrestling with each other, falling on the ground. Everything's fine. Teenagers to 26 years old, they're resilient, they're strong, and they're fast. These are your peak athletic years. You're playing football, hitting guys, your baseball, your rotator cuff's so strong, you're throwing the 100-mile-an-hour fastball. But they tend to lack judgment because they feel so strong and so fast. They go, hey, I could do that. My skateboard buddy did that. I know I can do that. So then they start breaking bones and they start getting their injuries because they're still feeling like they're invincible. Then we start hitting 30 to 40. This is when the major changes in the resiliency of tissue starts to happen. So when we start strengthening, if we're starting at 30 and 40, understand your tissue is a little bit more fibrous. This is when we're busy with life, busy with families and things. We're not working out regular. So then we go to do something like a weekend warrior, or we try to do something lifting, pushing, pulling aggressively for the first time, where we've moved from one house to another, too many boxes. We get more strains and sprains, and we start asking, why can't I do this anymore? I've always been able to do this. All of a sudden, I'm straining muscle and tendon. Then you hit your 50s to 60s. I stole this from one of the country songs. My wife loves country music, goes to Stagecoach every year. Missing it this year, by the way. But that phrase from one of the songs goes, I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm good once as I ever was. And when you're 50s to 60s, you still feel strong. You still feel like you can do stuff, and everything's fine until it isn't. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I was getting strains and sprains when I'm 30 to 40, and now it's like, I'll have this day, I feel like $1 million, and I'm fine, I can go do it. And then I go do the same thing again another day. I've torn my meniscus in my knee, I've torn my rotator cuff, and da-da-da. No, so why is that? And it's just because of the changes in the tissue that happens with age. 70s to 80s. This is I used to do this, I used to do that, I used to be a Marine, I used to be a football player, and you start feeling like, wow, why am I having so much trouble with all these things? And the used to stories start coming out. And then 90s to 100, it's congratulations, you made it this far to get all these problems. And the thing is when you're talking about strength and you look at from birth to getting near the end, it's what are you going to do to keep your body as fit and functional as possible so you get to do more things. When you get to do more things, you're not injuring all the time. That's where your quality of life comes from. So that's the importance of the strengthening. Go into the next slide. So what are we going to do about it? Well, the first thing is you got to set realistic goals. At no point is Cirque du Soleil going to hire me to be an acrobat. I do not have the flexibility, the control, and the strength to go on the trapeze, jump on those balls and those. I don't know how the guy did it. It was like a straight rod up and down. It wasn't even fixated to the floor, and he was able to climb it and jump off of it. It was just amazing. So we got to set realistic goals. What have we done in the past? Have we been sedentary since a teenager and office worker, sitting at a desk throughout our lives, and then all of a sudden we're starting to strengthen in our 60s, 70s, 80s? Have we been fit our whole life and maybe we've worn out a joint? We have a degenerative knee, a degenerative shoulder, our back's hurting. What's happened there? So where are we starting from? Do we have a good base? Maybe we've done cycling our whole lives and we have a really good cardiovascular, but we're not really strong in our core. So what are we trying to achieve? Do we want to get to hiking? Do we want to be able to lift, push, pull in a gym? Do we want to join a Pilates class? What is the goal? So we have to see what's the foundation of where you're starting from, what do we want to get to, and then how do we gradually build that? Because if you try to go from 0 to hero in one shot, that's when you're going to get injured. So you're going to go to your doc and you're going to have a talk with them, say, hey, I'm starting a program for the first time. What do I need to worry about? Or, you know, is my blood pressure okay? Things that we would need to know as a physical therapist is, you know, what's your medical state, so that when we start an exercise regimen, you know, we don't want to push you into a stroke or a heart attack or any of those types of things. So you got to get those things cleared first before you start. If you're already exercising and you see your doctor regular, you already know where your status is, and hopefully you're learning how to manage some of the medical things that you have. So the next thing you do is you consult a physical therapist. If you're starting, for sure, you come on in and then we find out, let's sit down, let's talk about your goals. Let's do an assessment and find out what your foundation is. What do you have going for you? Do you, you know, again, have you never lifted a weight, or are you really good at strengthening programs, but now you're starting to have symptoms and figuring things out? I've had power lifters with rotator cuff problems, impingement problems, just because of how their form of how they were lifting in the gym. We've had to change that. So it can happen at any level. So then what you want to do is you want to gradually, especially if you haven't been working out, you want to gradually change your lifestyle to prevent injury and increase your chances for success. If you've started late, it's about injury prevention and improving quality of life. If you've already been at a high level of fitness, it's about how do you maintain it? How do you modify it? Because sometimes what happens with high level athletics is you got to start letting certain things go, because now what's happening is you're breaking your body down and you're injuring it. And if you want to keep playing, say tennis or golf or something like that, you might have to alter your frequency. Like, for example, I get a lot of golfers whose backs are starting to go, but they like playing 6 days a week. And it's like no athlete all year long can play 6 days a week without consequences. So then we have to figure out how to manage the athlete to keep them in the game. Going to the next slide. So there are a variety of strengthening systems, and when you start breaking them down, there's advantages and disadvantages to both. Now, if you grew up, you know, or you were more of a teenager in 20s in the 80s, this is Schwarzenegger and Ferrigno, Lou Ferrigno, you know, the guy that played the original Hulk, and all these guys are just these massive, you know, how big can you get? That's what weight training is going to get you. So if you're lifting metal, then you got to understand you're putting a high strain through your bone, through your muscle, through your tendon. Of course, if you're lifting heavy weight. Now you can build muscle with older tissue, you just have to keep the weight down. So you'll stimulate that muscle for growth. You'll challenge the tendon. It can strengthen the tendon. It can definitely strengthen the bone and stave off the osteoporosis. And actually, anyone who has osteoporosis has been told it's good to have a weight training program. It's just figuring out how much weight should you be lifting. It's also about form. So for example, when you're doing a bench press, if you let your arms go too low, you can actually tear your rotator cuff. You can also injure the ligament on the front of that shoulder. So you have to watch the depth of how you lower a dumbbell or lower a barbell. So these are the things to figure out there. If you've been weight training for a long time, I've had some people that have worn themselves out with weight training, and they have to shift more to not lifting metal. So they get to more body weight exercises. They start leaving the gym, but they still want to challenge themselves with fitness. And this is going to the yoga and the Pilates and the high intensity interval training or circuit training. And then manual labor we'll talk about at the end. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So weight training is great for any age. So you see here, a lot of different sizes of people, a lot of different body types, and different challenges, lifting a kettlebell on the left, using a machine, which is a lat pull down in the center, and then sitting on an unstable surface, a ball, a Swiss ball, and then lifting dumbbells is on the right. So all of these are challenging muscle, challenging bone. You got to have enough balance, of course, to sit on that ball to lift those weights. So again, you're just trying to figure out, you know, what are your tools that you have, where are you starting from, and what are we trying to get to? Go to the next slide. So when you look at yoga and Pilates, they always seem to be fighting each other. So I saw this funny slide, yoga versus Pilates. When you look at yoga, I always used to say yoga is just a 4-letter word for stretching. But with some of the poses that they do, and if you look at the girl in the diagram, at one point she's doing a plank, which is when you look like you're in push-up position, and you actually have to do kind of a push-up to switch from one position to another. So there's a certain strength component you're going to need with yoga. And also when you're holding some of the positions, to manage that, you have to have a certain amount of strength to hold yourself there. When you look to the right on Pilates, this is always seems to be, when you see Pilates, this is the ultimate position everyone's trying to get to, is the V-sit with a perfectly straight back, perfect legs straight. And it's like, you know how much core strength you need to have to pull that position off? That's amazing. So that's usually the goal you get to, but you don't start there. So Pilates had its background in dance. So when you look at ballet dancers or Broadway dancers, some of the moves that they pull off, they have to have this core strength to be able to stand on a toe and stick one leg out to the side in the air, and their body's perfectly straight as they extend their arm. So yoga, of course, East Indian background you always see with the namaste and the, you know, the stretching and the flexibility. And you always see the yogi that, you know, can fold himself up into a box and pull himself out. So they just have amazing amount of flexibility. But both of them offer a flexibility and a strengthening component. So you could choose either one and be fine. Start off at a beginning class, though. Go to the next one. And then high intensity interval training. So this used to be called circuit training. And before that, if you were in the Army, they called it calisthenics. So basically what you're doing here is you're taking a certain amount of time to do an exercise. So if you look at the one on the left, you do 20 seconds of running in place, and you got to time yourself. You take your 10 seconds of rest to recover, and then you do the 20 seconds of the jumping jacks. Then another 10-second rest, and then 20 seconds of the jump squats. And then after that rest, then you do 20 seconds of push-ups. So there's only 4 exercises there. But if you were to challenge yourself with this, if you know it's safe for you, you know, and you tried even just doing this, you'd get a small taste of what high intensity interval training is. And then you'd watch your heart rate start coming up. So you're challenging not only your strength, but your cardiovascular system. But with the jumping squats and the push-ups, those are the ones where you really get the strengthening component. The one off to the right here with the 4-minute workout, the walkout press. If you can't do a push-up, this lady, see if I can even demonstrate here. All you're doing is you're getting yourself into a push-up position and then holding it and then coming back out of it. So if you're having trouble with doing a full push-up, actually getting your, you know, yourself to press all the way to the floor, you don't need to do that here. So the great thing about high intensity interval training, even though you hear the word high intensity, you can modify the moves to challenge the muscle, but not put yourself into such a high intensity you're going to injure again. And then doing the lunge, you can see her doing the lunge motion. Again, that's tough on the legs, but then adding the kick. So if you're going to do a kick, you need to make sure you have the balance to actually pull the kick off and then switch over to another lunge. And then what's really good, if you do this early, when I would say at least in your 50s, being able to practice getting on and off the floor. So what she's doing there is lying back on her back and then getting up. So she's starting here. You can see me there. So she's from here, getting herself up, standing up, and then finishing off with the jump. So it's easy to pull that off on one, but then you got to get back down and you got to do it again for 40 seconds and see how many you can get in. So as you transfer from that one, then you go to the position she has on the bottom there where she's raising the one leg into the air and then doing the, I think they call it a V crunch, where you're standing here or you're in this position. And you bring this one up and you bring the leg in towards your chest. And then you can bring the other one up and bring that in like that. So again, you start doing those motions over and over and over for those 40 seconds, you're getting that cardio component with the strengthening component. Very good. Going to the next slide. And then manual labor. So when you look at that, I get these construction guys that'll come in and they got a shoulder problem or they've got tendonitis on their forearm from holding the skill saw all day long. And so if a guy's building a house and he's been lifting that plywood and doing drywall and everything else, and you're going to tell him, hey, I need you to go to the gym and work out, then they look at you and go, I've been working out all day. So the thing is there, if part of the way you want to gain strength, going to a gym and doing all these funny motions is just not for you. If you pick an activity like building something in your backyard with someone, or you're doing gardening, like the raking, the loading up the green bin and bringing it out to the front, and those types of things, hey, you're using strength. So that in some cases can be a replacement, but of course, strengthening you need to do every other day. You work the muscle, then you give it a rest, then you work the muscle, then you give it a rest, and that decreases your risk for injury. Some people that do 6-day workouts, they know how to cycle muscle. So they're working some muscles one day, giving them a rest while they work another set of muscles on the next day so that they can do a 6-day in a row program. That's a little higher level, and it's also challenging. You also have to know when to stop when something's starting to get strained. But the manual labor thing is you can definitely get, you can challenge those muscles, build yourself doing something fun that you find fun. It doesn't have to be a gym if you don't find gyms fun. Very good. Yep, going to the next slide. So what I wanted to do is talk about showing you some exercises that I give patients. Again, this is, I'm hitting such a big audience here. You know, some people are very fit, some people are, you know, wondering what to do for the first time, and it's hard to get everybody in. So these are common ones. Even some of the higher level workout people, if you haven't looked at your posture, or maybe you haven't challenged your core, like sometimes my weightlifters, they might just be, you know, we joke around sometimes. We'll see this, the upper body guy doesn't work the legs, or you see the leg guy doesn't work the upper body, or somebody's ignored their core or whatnot. So those are, some of these might be challenging for you. So I'm just gonna go through them, and if you wanna, if you feel safe and you wanna try some of them, fine. If you don't feel like, I don't want you to get injured, so I can't help you from here through Zoom. So the chin tuck, what it is you got to go against the wall, and what you're going to do is you're going to bring your chin in towards your throat like this. So if you got a forward head posture and you're stuck like this is what we get from the computer. This is why we get tension headaches and neck problems and numbness tingling down the arm. So what you want to do is you want to get up nice and tall, tuck that chin in towards the throat, and then you'll feel a pull at the back of your neck. And if you feel that there, that's where you're starting to get stiff. But not only are you stretching that, but you're working your deep neck flexors and trying to strengthen that to hold yourself up. So I'm going to show you against the wall here. I might need Brett to adjust the camera. But if you put your butt, your shoulders, can you see me there okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Yep. So your feet need to be forward from the wall, like that, butt on the wall, shoulders. Then you take your chin, tuck it in, and try to get the base of your skull to that wall. Some of you might be here, and you go and it's blocked, and the only way to get your head to the wall is you're going to tip up. If you tip up, you don't want to do that because you're not using those deep neck flexors to correct that. You're trying to get from here into here. If you're blocked and you can't get your head to the wall, you might have to bring the wall to your head. So what you would do, sorry about that, you grab a pillow or a towel, and you stick that behind, and then it gives you something to push into. And then you can start strengthening your neck to correct that posture that way. And then of course, as you gain range, you can make it smaller, and then keep working it in from there until you get to the wall itself. Very good. The next one is the clamshell. So clamshells are part of your core. Your core is your stomach, your buttock, and your low back muscles. They all work together to control the pelvis. The stronger you have in these muscles, the strength you have here, pushing, pulling, lifting, carrying gets so much easier. So the clamshell helps to work hip extensors and hip external rotators. You don't need to memorize all that, but when you're lying on your side, you want to stack your knees and feet on top of each other. And anyone that's done some circuit training already or Pilates, you've probably done this one. You lift the top knee off, you keep the feet together. And what you'll notice is that to make this easy, you'll roll your body back, and you'll find you can do this all day. So if you haven't been challenging yourself, what you want to do is make sure you take that top part of the pelvis, the one that's facing the ceiling, you've got to roll that forward a little bit, then do it again, and you're going to notice it's a lot harder because it's heavier. So if it's rolled back, it's easier. If you roll forward with that pelvis and lift your knee, it's going to be harder. You're going to feel that muscle in that buttock. That's one of your balance muscles. That's why clamshells are such a good exercise to do. Very good. Anybody got a question on that one?
This is Candace, Ken. And I was just wondering, since it's so small and your PowerPoint is on the screen, can we switch it so that you can still see what you're going to do next?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
You on the bigger screen. Because we have people that are trying to do it along with you, and I don't know if they can see you that well.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and flip it. Let's see if that works.
Can you do that, Guillermo?
People can do it on their own if they touch the icon on the very bottom right.
Yeah, and I think you can pin the video, or I think it says like it's hard to read.
I
But
can't.
Does anybody having trouble seeing it? Okay.
You can't change it, Guillermo, so that he's on there instead of the PowerPoint?
Candace, the picture of Ken on the bottom right, if you put your finger on that, it will flip the images automatically.
Mine's not flipping stuff, and it usually does. So that's why I asked that.
Well, mine did, so
Yeah.
I don't know what to say, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe because I'm on a host thing.
Okay. One of the glitches we got to work on for sure. The next one is the hip abduction. So in this position, you're going to be on your side again. The bottom knee is bent to make a stable base. And then you're going to lift the leg up to the side. Now this one, I see people doing it incorrectly all the time because they're weak on the muscle that's in the buttock. So what they're going to do again, like the clamshell, is they're going to roll their pelvis back and they bring the leg forward like this. This is your hip flexor. Most of us can do this all day long because that hip flexor is so strong. But where we're weak is back in the buttock. This is another balance muscle. You've got to roll that pelvis forward, get a straight line from your shoulder to your hip, to your knee, to your ankle. You can turn the toe down a little bit, lift the heel up and back, and you'll feel it in the butt cheek. If you feel it right here, you know you've got the right muscle. If you're lazy on this one, you'll drop your pelvis, move your leg forward and go, yeah, that's easy. If it's easy, you're probably missing the mark. You got to lie on your side, roll that pelvis forward, bring that leg up and back to get that hip abductor. Very good. The other one to look at is the chair squat. Squats, you get a lot of bang for your buck with squats because you're using your core muscles, you're using your hip extensors, your quads, a lot of big muscle groups. When you use the big muscle groups, less chances of getting injured, and you get a lot more rapid response from them. So when you do them from the chair, if you're weak, you might have trouble getting out of the chair. So I'll demonstrate over here. You have to make sure you get to the edge of the chair. You got to get your feet underneath you. You don't want the backs of your calves touching the chair because some of you will use the backs of your legs to push against the chair, and you see me sliding the chair back. That's how you're going to fall. It's better if the chair is actually braced against the wall. Get that butt forward again. You reach forward as far as you can until you lift off of the chair. And that's the easiest way and the safest way to pull off the squat. If you can't get up from the chair, you might have to use pillows. And what you're doing is you're boosting yourself up to make it easier. So you might be able to use, you might be able to do sit to stand with a couple of pillow boosts. As you get stronger, you start taking the pillows away, and then you can do it from a standard height chair. Very good. So I'll use my cheat sheet here. So the next one, sorry for that, is the bridging. So going back to the mat here, bridging is a way to do a squat. If you can't do the squats, you're lying on your back, you're using the same muscle. So it's also, bridging is also called a pre-squat. So what you're doing here is you lift up, you're trying to get a straight line from your knee to your hip. From your knee to your hip, to your shoulder. So straight line, knee, hip, shoulder, just like that. And then to make it harder, you shift your weight to one leg, straighten the knee out. You want a straight line from your ankle, knee, hip, and shoulder. If you're weak, what's going to happen? You're going to drop here and you're going to lift your leg too high. So again, you could do this all day, but if you're doing the bridging with the straight leg raise, you lift that butt, you'll feel your butt clenching, you'll feel your abs working. When you shift your weight to one leg and you try to straighten it, your pelvis is going to want to drop, and you're going to want to hold it there, nice and straight like that. Then you just alternate the legs, thighs staying at the equal level right there. You do like a 5-second hold. You can do sets of 10, you can do sets of 20, and then you can go on time. You can do it for 30 seconds with 5-second holds on each one. Very good. That's bridging with the straight leg raise. And then a nice little rotator cuff program. So trying to hit a bunch of muscle groups. Rotator cuff is a really common problem after 50. So this is the little series that you would do. You get your resistance bands. You want to stand nice and tall with a good posture. You don't want to be out like this. You want to be like this. Get those shoulders back. Pull the hands to the hips. Using that good posture. Using sets of 8 to 12. So how you plan on how much resistance you're using. When you get to the 8th rep, you maybe could do 9 and 10, but after that, you're pretty much done. You're not going to make it to 11 or 12. But if you get to 12 and you're going like this, it's too easy. So you need a little bit of a heavier pull. So that's when you're trying to figure out how much weight is enough with bands. When you get to the 8th to the 10th rep, you should be fatigued and feeling like, yeah, I'm done. And then you're going to need a rest after that. If you get to 3 reps and you can't pull the band's too heavy. So that's how you know it's too heavy. And then of course, if it's too light, you could do it past 12 and just keep going. It's like it's not enough weight. Very good. Standing here again, the palm faces forward, the elbow straight. You pull the band towards you, but you leave a space. Everyone wants to bring the hand to the hip and they turn the elbow in and internally rotate it. You don't want to do that. You want to keep that elbow nice and straight, pull into the side like this. You'll feel those shoulder muscles working there. And then the one that really gets the rotator cuff is you're going to have your palm up, elbow in at the side. You're going to pull out like this, maybe up a little bit on an angle like that. You don't want to drop it down like this. Everyone, when they're weak in their cuff, you see the hand drop like this. You've got to keep it at a 90-degree angle. Pull it up like this. You'll start to feel burning in the shoulder when the blood's filling up in the rotator cuff. And that's how you're going to help building that muscle there. Very good. So, you know, you could pretty much spend hours and hours. There's just so many ways to strengthen. So from high intensity interval training, weight training, grabbing metal, doing sets of 8 to 12, doing just functional things like getting out of the chair, building strength, just doing a chair squat. The bridging with the straight leg raise I showed you, that's something you would see in Pilates at certain levels, more beginning to intermediate levels. Advanced levels is like the V-sit you saw in the picture. So that's where the goal setting comes in. It's like we can go, there's millions and millions of movements. There was P90X, there was Zumba, there was Insanity, there's the Navy SEALs training regimen, it's endless. It's however you market it, you know that there's gonna be t-shirts and an energy drink and a diet. But the thing is, when you look at all the different ways to strengthen, there's such a variety out there. Don't get overwhelmed with that. Find out what your goal is and get the exercises you need to achieve that goal, and it makes it a whole lot simpler. So I hope this was helpful for everyone. There's a little taste of what strengthening is all about. And if you got any questions on your program or injuries that you're worried about, or things that you're doing, or you're concerned about your own strength losses, things like that, and you got some questions, let me know. I'll be happy to answer your questions. Quick question
on the straps. If I tie them around a doorknob, is that the right length in my house to have them?
Yeah, it's a really common question. So what I tell people, I tie the loop for them. And if you go to a bathroom door and you put it on the inside doorknob and then you close the door to trap it, it won't fly off and hit you. So the little latch thing, you know, when the door closes and the latch keeps the door closed, don't let the TheraBand hit that because it'll cut it. So yeah, you just put it on the inside doorknob, close the door, let it drape below the latch. And yeah, everybody always wonders, is there an optimal angle to pull the TheraBand? And you'll see in the clinic, we have these things on the wall that have different levels. And yeah, when we're doing something for a thrower, like a baseball pitcher or something like that, yeah, we need to change the angle a little bit. But when you're just doing general fitness, you don't have to worry about that.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
I love that Scott was like working that right with you.
Nice.
Doing the exercises right with you.
That's guy. I saw someone working on there. Right on. He's getting right in there. Right on, brother.
And good to see Roger. I feel like, you know, Mr. Rogers myself saying, and I see, but it's good to see Roger because he was stuck on a cruise ship for quite a while.
No.
So it's good to see Roger. I don't know if he's.
That's a nightmare.
Yeah, he might be off already.
Hey, Ken?
Yeah.
We do have another question. It says, what modifications should I consider to protect inguinea hernia repairs, which are several years ago?
Inguinal hernia. Yeah, so the inguinal hernia, that's a tough one because when you're looking at the abdominal wall from the anatomy perspective, we're looking at a muscle wall that holds back what we call your viscera, you would call it your guts. So if you have an inguinal hernia, it's right in the groin crease, right in here. And the problem with that when you're doing core work is when your abs contract, it increases intra-abdominal pressure. So when you look at you're going to laugh on this one, but you know your belly, right? It's soft. So when you squish it, there's nothing hard there. There's no bone holding that back. So then when you contract your abs and you squeeze, now I can't push my hand in there anymore because my muscles are firm because I've contracted them. When I contract them, it increases pressure inside your abdominal area, and that's what holds your spine as a rigid pillar. So the stronger your abs are, you always hear this, the stronger your abs are, the more support you have on your back. But if something's happened where that abdominal wall is now split open, when you increase intra-abdominal pressure, it's going to push your guts or whatever's behind that into that hole. So people that have hernias, you always hear it, right? You can't do heavy lifting because if you do heavy lifting, you're going to contract your abs, do a big abdominal pressure, and you're going to push that through and make the hernia bigger, damage it more. So there's always lifting restrictions for people that have abdominal hernias. And when you go and get the surgery, my understanding, unless it's changed, is they just use a mesh that holds it back. They don't sew the two ends back together because if they did, the tissue's so weak anyway, it just splits apart and they'd have to do it again anyway. But the mesh doesn't replace the abdominal wall. So you can actually pull the tissue also off the mesh. So you do have to keep your weightlifting at a minimum because if you do that maneuver to strengthen, use your abs to lift, you could advance the hernia. So people do better with the body weight exercises rather than lifting metal. So that's how I would modify that. And then the higher level Pilates moves or higher level yoga moves, if you really need a lot of abdominal contraction, that can also advance the hernia. So you might have to stay at a beginner to intermediate level. You might not be able to do some of the advanced moves. Hernias are frustrating. I don't think I can hear you, Brett. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I guess I'd unmute myself. Another question that came in for Candace and Guillermo is what we're doing. Will they be able to access this at a later date so that they can follow along with the exercises you were showing? And our objective is we are recording this and we will and post it on the center's website somewhere. We'll get back to you with that.
Part of this as an experiment as well, if this is working and people are able to see what I'm doing and it's making sense, this is just a mishmash of things to show you strength. But if you want, maybe something we could do is if you need a rotator cuff program, we could say, oh, okay, here's an entire program for that. Or if say you've had a hip replacement, you say, well, what kind of exercises should I be doing? But that's where we got to be careful is when you're under my care, I have you in the room and I can see you. And if something's going wrong, then I can modify it right away. The problem with this format, when we're doing those types of things, even though it's great to throw all those exercises in packages, is if you're going to hurt yourself, you may not know it. So that's something as we're evolving with Zoom here is to try to figure out how can we develop that and plus protect you at the same time.
Yep.
To be determined.
To be determined. Yes.
Exactly.
I love the idea though. Someone said, hey, will these be accessed so we can do it along with him? It's like, yes. Mm-hmm. And they're already out there. There's personal trainers that are putting programs out there. It's just remember from a physical therapist standpoint, I'm not dealing with well tissue. I'm dealing with people that have had injuries and surgeries. So my training is to say, okay, give me your damage list. And now we're going to figure out how we can exercise you and not damage you anymore.
Yeah. And so to that question as a follow-up, so anything we do post will be listed at the centerps.org, and it will be under physical health Eisenhower lectures. So when we get these up and running, and again, these are, TBD and kind of working, we're moving in that direction. So the centerps.org, and then under physical health, and then lectures will be where we post kind of follow-up materials and that. And I would say if there are things that you would like to see specifically, and we should have said that up front as well, please always email the center. You can always email me at Eisenhower, bklein@eisenhowerhealth.org, and we'll be happy to investigate those and see if we can get them into a lecture or a Zoom or whatever that looks like as we move forward.
Yeah, another thing is we're moving forward in this, and this is evolving. We want to figure out a way to kind of evaluate how these things are doing for people. Like if you're liking it, and what could it, how could we do this better? We haven't figured that out yet. But I think it's something that moving forward with these programs, we want to know if they're helpful to you. We want to know if these are, along the lines, and if you found it very helpful to find out this information in this kind of format. So maybe later we'll be doing follow-up. I don't know. We haven't figured it out yet, but that's what I said. This is only our third one, so we'll be moving that direction, I'm sure.
What I think is great about community feedback is, then we gear the programs to what we need in this community. Having grown up in Canada, we don't have to worry about trudging through the snow, so I don't have to have that discussion. But definitely, yeah, when we get people telling us what you guys need, then we can gear the programs for this community, which is great.
So if you do have thoughts, and another email for the center is info@thecenterps.org. So info@thecenterps.org is where you can send some evaluation or anything you'd like to do on that. And Dan gave us a thumbs up. Thank you so much. And Heather loved it. And I see a lot of people kind of checking in with different things. Any last minute questions or other things that came up? Keep everybody motivated, all that kind of stuff. Just take yourself off mute if you want to do the ask a personal question as well. All right. It is good to see everybody's face and to see, it's just funny, is it to see into your rooms as well. It's kind of funny. I see some artwork and some things that I'm always impressed by. So thank you.
Yes, thank you everybody for showing up. Dan, always good to see you from Seattle. You know that, and I love that we have, not only just our Palm Springs folks, but our visitors that come and our snowbirds. So, so thank everybody for your participation tonight. We look forward to seeing you on future Zooms.
All right. Well, next Wednesday, in fact, 5:30.
Yeah, 5:30.
Hey.
Bye, everybody.
Everybody.
Thank you.